So welcome to Voices in Health and Wellness. This is the show where we bring together clinicians, coaches and change makers from across the health space to explore what's working, what's shifting, and what it really takes to build sustainable care. I'm your host, Dr. Andrew Greenland, an NHS doctor and functional medicine practitioner, and today's conversation is one I've been especially looking forward to. We're joined by Anele Griessel, an occupational therapy consultant with more than 25 years of experience. Based in Warwick, UK, Annelle now works primarily with neurodivergent teens and adults, supporting them with body-based, sensory-informed interventions that help regulate stress and build resilience, all grounded in the belief that healing starts when we choose joy. So Annelle, with that, I'd like to welcome you to the show and thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. So would you mind starting perhaps telling us a little bit about your journey into OT? What drew you towards sensory work specifically? And perhaps you better start by telling everybody what OT is for those that are uninitiated.
Yeah, no, I'll do my best. Yes, occupational therapy is a health profession. It's very much grounded both in, I think, psychology, as well as in neuroscience. And there's also a lot of medical side to it as well. And through that, our focus is on what we call occupation. And occupation is basically everything that we do. So when I meet someone, it's about exploring what are the issues in their life and the kind of different roles that they have to kind of fulfill and all of the bits that they have to do in everyday life. And then you're looking at the medical side, you're looking at the mental health side, and you're looking at what is stopping them. And then you make a plan together. And sometimes that's compensatory, sometimes it's about strategies. So that's basically what an occupational therapist do. We work in all sorts of settings. We work with adults, with older people, with younger children as well. And my journey into OT, I really wanted to go and study drama. And the only course that I could find that had an element of drama was occupational therapy. And a very wise person at school said, well, you look as if you could do it. Why don't you apply? So I applied in South Africa and I started my journey a long time ago. But I've loved it every single minute. Since I started it, it was absolutely the best decision. And I got so many experiences. In South Africa, they throw you into practicals right from the start. So it was a very turbulent time in South Africa at the time. It was just as the country was moving from apartheid into what the country is now. And so there was a lot of change, and we had to go and work in very rural areas some days. And, sometimes it was quite extreme. But I think it helps to form you as an occupational therapist. And then I came to the UK and I started to work here, and I've been so blessed working in the UK. And my journey with working with children and young people started in the 2000s. But as I say, my interest in sensory integration probably grew from then, because I realized that there's this part of our brains, of the way that we perceive our environment, and then how we react to it. And that has a very, very significant impact on how we are and how we do things and how we connect with other people. So my journey just, I started to study it more and more and more. And I think it's been in recent years, probably the last 5 years, that the whole kind of, I think, well, probably started in COVID, maybe a little bit before that, is when I started to kind of look at the impact of stress and how our sensory receptors receive those stress signals from the environment. And I felt that occupational therapy, with all of my colleagues, that's something that's a really well-placed occupation, and that we can help people through it. So that's really where it started. But I absolutely love what I do. I enjoy working with people, and I get to play. That's the other bonus on a daily basis.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing the journey. Always love to hear how people have ended up doing what they do. Great. So I think you mentioned that your work is about choosing joy. What does that mean to you, and how does it show up in your clinical work?
Yeah. So Desmond Tutu is one of my absolute heroes, and I felt that the way that he navigated not just the transition in South Africa, but also his own kind of perceive and how he journeyed through his own illness was such a testament. And I came across the Book of Joy. It was a beautiful book that he did with the Dalai Lama. And in that, I first realized that joy is not the same as happiness. And I also realized that you choose joy. So joy is an absolute choice, that even in adverse circumstances, joy is always there and it's underlying and you can choose it. And it doesn't mean that life doesn't get hard. It doesn't mean that you never get overwhelmed. But intrinsically, there's a choice that you can make. And that's really what changed things for me in a personal way, but also in the work that I do is, so I try and instill that happiness is a feeling. Joy goes much deeper. And joy is a choice that we make, but it's also something that when we nurture our sensory system is something that we can enhance and we can help thrive our sense of joy. And through joy, we build resilience. And resilience is really one of those absolute key factors that that helps us to get through difficult times. And it helps us to get through times when we think, how on earth am I going to do this? And sometimes it's about taking very, very small steps and literally going, well, for today, I have 3 balls of energy, and how am I going to use it? And communicating to the people around you that, I've only got 3 balls of energy today, or some people talk about the spoon theory, but I just visualize balls better. And what that means is that when you communicate that, I found that with my children, that sometimes if I communicate to them and say, today is a low energy day, let's see how we're going to do this, but let's finish with joy, and let's see that we can really instill that. And what are the choices that we're going to make today joyful? And I feel the antithesis to kind of stress is always thinking about being playful, is how can we enhance the day through a playful approach? So that's really instilled a lot of what I do and what I believe in. I absolutely believe in choosing joy.
Amazing. Look, you've worked in so many contexts over the last 25 plus years. What shifted most in how you approach care today?
I think what shifted for me was the amazing people that I've met professionally in my work, the clients, the families that I've worked with so far and on an ongoing basis. And I think one of the most profound things was to look at the family as a system, and that it's not just the child that I'm working with, but it's really looking at the whole family and looking at the dynamics within that. And then also looking at the young people that I work with, they teach you so much. A lot of the young teenagers now, we know that there's an epidemic of mental health problems in our young people. And I feel by listening to what they bring, by really understanding and going to sit with them, sometimes I don't have the answers. But when I'm honest about that, and we can sit together and we can work out some very, very small things that we can change just for today, just for now, just for the next half hour. We can make small changes, but they've really inspired me. I've worked with, I would say, more than 1,000 families by now, and they've been really, really inspirational. And apart from that, I think growing up in South Africa and seeing the change happening there, seeing the hardship that people have, and some people don't have privileges of proper houses. And still, when you go into those, we call them shanty towns, there's an underlying sense of joy. There's an underlying sense of we can get through this, which I don't think is often talked about, because I know South Africa, they do have there's a bad name, and I don't deny that. There is a lot of stuff happening in South Africa that's scary, that's hard. People get hurt. But despite that, there is as I say, there's a sense of joy and there's a sense of resilience that's just incredible. And I think those two aspects have really inspired me to move away slightly of the traditional occupational therapy work that I do, and really focus on how can I support people in understanding their own sensory systems, and then through that, let's see how we can put in some strategies where their sensory system can be nurtured. And people like Stephen Porges, Bessel van der Kolk, these are people that I've fairly recently come across, probably in the last 10 years. But the work that they do around trauma, and that the body keeps the score, but also the sense that what is safety? What does that mean? And what are the things that we need to, in the first instance, create? We need that sense of safety. And I think healing happens when we're safe. And it's about, explaining that to parents. It's about explaining that to the person that I work with, is what are the things that we can make life safer for you? And then from a place of safety, we look at connection. We also look at, as I say, playfulness, nurturing our sensory systems. And through that, very, very slowly, you can start to build small actions, and small actions, lead to routines, and that eventually leads to habits. And then slowly, you build that resilience. And through that, it is a joy to really see how people then rediscover choosing joy, and how they thrive going forward, and are more productive, and feel that life is something that's not just hard, it is something that's there to be enjoyed.
Thank you. Really interesting. Look, you're now working mostly with neurodivergent teens and adults. What are the key themes or challenges that come up most often for that demographic?
I think anxiety, I would say, is probably one of the single most things that I come across. And that goes across all the neurodivergencies. And I think when we think about neurodiversity, sometimes we focus on autism, and it's not just autism. There's the ADHD, there's dyspraxia. So dyspraxia is something that I come across a lot, is where someone really struggles to plan their motor actions, to sequence, to organize themselves, and life just feels like a mess. But anxiety is absolutely the number one difficulty that I feel are felt, that feel of not belonging, of being out of sync with the world around them. And that brings stress, and that brings a worry, because a lot of people will say they are that typical, kind of square peg in a round hole, and that is very, very difficult, is to bring that sense of, you're a person, and what are the things that we can start to put in place. And again, when I think, sometimes when we talk about overwhelm, that sense that comes with anxiety, and that sense of overwhelm, that life is just too much. There's just too much going on. There's too much input that I have to deal with on a daily basis. And all of those sensory experiences that I'm having to deal with, the demands being placed on me, I just cannot do that, because we know that, especially in our autism population, a lot of them feel that they can only focus on one thing at a time. And when there is so many demands coming from different angles, it just becomes too much. So one of the things that I really am passionate about is to reduce overwhelm. And one of the ways to do that is to bring in notice, but notice with intent. So the way that we go about that is, in the first place, it's like a circuit breaker. We need to kind of stop this cognitive feeling of overload, this emotional feeling of overload, and we need to bring a stop in. And when we stop, we breathe, and then we notice. And the way that we notice, I really enjoy very silly prompts. So I will sometimes give people a little homework, and I'll say to them, for today, when you walk from the bus station into work, I want you to notice everything that's red. I want you to notice everything that's rough. I want you to notice, smelling. I want you to smell something that you've never smelled before. Can you identify that? So it's small prompts of noticing, but it's with intent, because that brings attention to noticing. And I think people use mindfulness a lot, and I think there's a lot, mindfulness is something that's very widely known, but I think if we break mindfulness down in its essence, it's about noticing, it's about being present. But I think some people do need help, and I need help with that as well, because sometimes life just whirls around. But it's when you can actually help someone to do that stop, do the breath, and then notice, that you circuit break some of that feeling of overwhelm, and then you can start to bring in some of those strategies that have been very, very difficult to acquire.
Really interesting. So you've been talking a lot about sensory first approaches. I'm just really curious to know why these are a game changer for clients compared to perhaps more traditional talk-based support, because perhaps some of what you've mentioned is not familiar to a lot of our listeners, and I just want to get that kind of distinction between what you do and traditional talk-based therapy, and why the sensory-based thing is more, in your eyes, more effective.
Yes. Well, as I say, one of the people that I've come across and have done some further reading on is Bessel van der Kolk, when he talks about trauma in a big sense. But he's written a book, The Body Keeps the Score. And what I've realized, and we know that the neuroscience talks about that, is that when we are in a state of overwhelm, our thinking part of our brains simply stop working. They go into shutdown, because the body is all about regulation. Our body all day long wants to know that our blood sugars are okay, our heart rate is okay from a medical sense, but then there's also the sense that the input that we're receiving, we talk about in occupational, well, not just in occupational therapy, but there's a term called neuroception. Now, I don't know where neuroception sits in the body, because I think it's a term that people have started to kind of use. But neuroception is really like a big satellite dish, is how I understand it anyway. It's a big satellite dish in our kind of nervous system. And what it does, it asks the question, is this safe or is this unsafe? So with any sensory input, when I talk about sensory input, it's the things that we hear, it's the things that we see, the things that we feel on a daily basis. The first thing that our brain does, and that's at a very low level, it's down at the brainstem, if we want to kind of look at where in the brain that is, there's the brain will ask, is this safe or is this unsafe? It's almost like a gatekeeper. And that's the beginning. So if it's safe, the message will pass through to be processed, and our brain will try and make sense of it. And then there's your different sensory systems that the messages will go to. So it will go to the, if we've seen something, it will go to the visual systems, or it will go to the auditory systems, or if it's something inside our body, it will go to the system where interoception is processed. So that tells you all about what's happening inside your body. Are you hungry? Do you need to go to the loo? All of those aspects are to do with what's happening inside our body. So that information then gets processed, and the brain then starts to, okay, so what is going on here? What's the discrimination that starts to happen? Is this regulating? So is this going to make me feel overwhelmed? Is this going to make me feel sleepy? Is this going to make me feel I want more of this? That's the regulation part. And then it also looks at discriminating. So what is this? What is this thing that I'm looking at? Is it a lamp? Oh, no, it's not a lamp. It's something else. Oh, I see what it is. It's, I don't know, a box. Your brain starts to kind of discriminate. So it brings meaning to what it is. And then you can have a response. to what it is. Oh, okay, goodness, thank goodness. It's not something that's going to hurt me. It's just a lamp. I'm going to switch it on because I need a little bit more light. So there's all sorts of things that happens within the sensory system, and it happens very quickly. And I apologize, I've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but the reason why talking therapies don't always work is because when we talk, it's a higher level of function that our brain needs to interpret. And that's often kind of much more, we have different layers in the brain, and our decision-making part of our brain, the brain that the part that interprets language and makes sense of that and can process that language into doable action. So if we think about executive functioning, that shuts down when the body is in stress and the body feels that this is not safe or that this is overwhelming. And then we need a different approach. We need a body-based approach. We need things, I know, a lot of people find yoga comforting, and they find that those body-based, or go for a run. Some people find movement really helps them to process kind of things that have been difficult for them to make sense of, or something that has been traumatic or stressful. They find by doing something reduces that stress. And that's what we're trying to do in sensory integration. We're looking at what are those body-based approaches? What is it that this person is their preference? What is the sense that really works well for them when they are stressed? How can we reduce it? Which strategies can we use? And sometimes it is very active, and it's about the person coming up with their own solutions, and you just guiding them through that. That is definitely by far the most effective way to do it.
Thank you. So I think when we talked before, you were talking about a sensory journal that you're turning into a mobile app. Would you mind just talking a little bit about that, and what is it going to help people to uncover?
Yeah, I'm very excited about that, because we're looking at it in two stages for the app to do two things. In the first place, it is about prompts that will help people on a daily basis to record notice with intent. So there will be a prompt. So for today, we invite you to notice something, a prompt that we will provide, and they can do that with a photo, and they can record also what it is. So there's no judgment there. We're not going to overanalyze that part. It's simply noticing and getting into that habit and routine of noticing with intent. And then the second part of the app, which I'm very excited about, is about looking at your own sensory preferences. And we've got different ways that we're trying to do that, because not everybody likes to complete questionnaires. So we are looking at a puzzle that people can put together, and that will then provide people with information about their specific sensory profile. So sensory profile, we can kind of look at that into roughly 4 quadrants, where people are either sensory seeking, so they need a lot of sensory information. So I often talk about the cups. Some people have really massive, big big cups that need a lot of filling of sensory input. And they will often be seeking and adrenaline seeking more input. Other people may have a very small cup, and that cup gets filled very easily, so they may be more sensitive to sensory information. Other people may arrive with a cup that's already full, and they will try and avoid any more sensory demands being placed on them. And then there are people whose cup is simply so big that they really struggle to register sensory information. So we're hoping that through the app, people will start to kind of look at their own sensory preferences, their own sensory profile, and then through the app, we aim to guide people through that journey to kind of come up with strategies to enhance life in all areas, because occupational therapy is absolutely about occupations. It's about what we do. So in the mornings going to work, are you someone who needs a strong coffee beforehand, or do you need a very gentle wake-up call instead? And going through the day, we know that our alertness levels go up and down. How can we really nurture and bring in some interesting ways to make life joyful, but to keep our overwhelm under wraps, really, and well, not really under wraps, but really deal with it in a way that brings resilience. So I'm very excited about the app that's in with very, very clever people at the moment. I can just talk about it, but they know how to put it all together.
Great, well, it's really something to be looking out for. I hope it all goes well. So you've done a lot of expert witness work as well as your clinical work. How has that sharpened or changed your clinical approach in doing that kind of specialist, detailed work?
Yes. Someone said to me, I'm very forensic in my approaches. And I think, being South African, I don't want to kind of do it too broad brush, but I think for me, as a South African, but also being English is my second language, I've always said in big team meetings that I simply don't have the finesse of lots of English vocabulary to be very gentle and to talk around a problem. I go straight in, and from what I see, I will analyze it, and I will give the message in a very clear and very simple way. So I think those two things have really informed my expert witness work, which requires you to really analyze and look at the holistic setting. So you look at the person, you look at the environment that they're in, you look at the task demands that they have to fulfill. And a lot of my expert work is to do with children. So it's looking at them within the school environment. What are the things that they really struggle with? So I'm very privileged because I get to meet lots of amazing young people. I get to go into lots of different school environments, and I can be very privileged to be a fly on the wall and to focus on one child, which is not something that teachers often get the privilege of. And I can look at that child, and I can look at how the environment, how just looking at how they behave, how the environment influences what they do, and then through structured assessments, you can then build a picture for this person and what is really difficult for them and what are the challenges for them, and then communicating that within an expert witness situation. So I feel I've been very blessed in that journey, and I think it's really sharpened the way that I notice and analyze information.
Thank you. Burnout is a huge conversation in healthcare. I just wonder what you've observed perhaps in yourself, or in terms of things that you do to protect yourself, or what you've noticed in the peers that you work with from a burnout perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. We know that life is fast. And I feel I don't think our bodies have been designed to keep up with the pace of life. Our bodies develop much slower, and they need a lot more time. But I think it's an American term, hustle. We are almost programmed to hustle. We programmed to kind of go and be productive. And we have to, our children have to attend 5 days worth of clubs, sometimes 6, 7, because that's what we do. We need to be busy. But there's a lot of demands being placed on us. And I think technology has been it's been amazing, technology, the advances that's been made on different levels. But what it has meant for our human brains and our human bodies is that we don't have time to switch off, because technology is with us all day, 24/7 hours, and I think lots of people will agree with me nowadays. An email comes in, you respond to it after hours because you've noticed it, and our body is designed to kind of deal with things. So you deal with it, and there's never time to stop. which, 30, 40 years ago, you that was possible. You went to work, you came home, there was television, but the television had an off switch. It wasn't that bombardment of technology, it wasn't bombardment of demands. And in terms of burnout, it's difficult. It's difficult because I don't think we always recognize the signs of burnout, because life has been so busy and so fast that our receptors of noticing has been blunted. And that's one of the reasons why I am on this mission to help people to slow down, to notice, and to just stop in the moment. I'm not saying, you don't always need half an hour to stop. Sometimes it's a 5-second stop. But in that stop, we breathe and we notice. And I think in terms of burnout for myself, how I've tried to protect myself, how I protect the people that I work with, the team that I work with, is that we have fun. Is we are purposely looking at what fun can we bring into the day, what playfulness can we bring into the day. I think it's been a wonderful woman, Aideen Brechner. She's Irish, and she was the one who taught me. She's an occupational therapist who works a lot with children who've been adopted, and what she's always said is that playfulness is the way that you counter stress. And I've tried it out, and absolutely, when you can, it doesn't always have to be a big playfulness, but it's finding moments where you can stop, where you can slow down, and then where you can bring in some fun aspect to the day. Sometimes it's really something very, very silly. It's if sometimes my kids think I'm absolutely loony, but even now they are now at university, so when they come home, I will still decorate their plates. I will make a funny face on their plates with the food when I put it out, and they go, "Oh, Mum!" But it does bring a smile, and it's something unexpected. So that's one of the things. It's something very small, but that's how I try and protect myself. That's how I try to protect the people that I come in contact with to burnout, because burnout is absolutely real, but it's about also slowing down and giving yourself permission to rest. That's one thing that we find in occupational therapy, the permission to rest, but sleep. And it doesn't always, rest has got many forms. It's not always just about sleep, but it's also an occupation that's been recognized now, is that we need rest. Our bodies need rest. We need that switch off to survive and to thrive.
Thank you. Love the smiley plate thing. I'm going to remember that. Thank you. So obviously your consultancy, your OT consultancy work, and you do expert witness work, you are running businesses. And I'm just curious to know, from a business point of view, what's going particularly well for you at the moment in those different aspects of what you do?
I'm someone who likes novelty. I think when I'm doing the same thing day in, day out, that is when my energy levels drop. So I'm always looking at new ways, new things that we can do. And I think we're in a very, very exciting time in every aspect. In the work that I do, there's a lot of interesting things that's happening. I think there's a recognition that body-based approaches are needed, it's necessary, and sometimes you need that body-based approach before a talking therapy happens, and that they work in conjunction with each other, and that medicine isn't always the first thing to reach for. There are other things that we need to do. In the first instance, I think there's something that's very exciting is looking at how we can help people to connect better, how we can help them connect better with themselves, help them to connect better with other people. And I think there's, we know that loneliness is something that's a big theme at the moment, but I think in all of these, it's looking at the opportunity. So for me, it's I work with a fantastic group of people. There's 10 amazing women that I work with, and what we are seeing is about how can we bolster, how can we really work with families, and how can we help them as a family unit to be stronger and to be more resilient. So sometimes it's about looking at every person in the family's sensory profile, and then helping each of them to recognize that not everybody in this family is the same. And also, so giving space, being tolerant, but also how can I help to nurture the other person's sensory system? What can I do, and what can they do for me? And those are very exciting. I'm very excited about that. And also reaching out. There's in occupational therapy, there's been a big shift in children's services. There's a lot of private practices starting, and there's a lot of funding that's starting to come available from charities, which is excellent, and it's very exciting. And it leaves us slightly freer to look at what is the actual need of this child. And sometimes we can take a little bit more time to work within the family on some of the difficulties. So there's lots of exciting things happening in among all the big umbrella conversations that's happening in the world.
And on the other side of the coin, what are some of the challenges or bottlenecks in running what you do as businesses? And is there anything you've had to particularly work on or overcome recently to, be more successful or to achieve your aims?
There's quite a lot of bottlenecks and there's quite a lot of challenges. Sometimes funding is a big challenge. For me, as I say, within the NHS, there are constraints that my colleagues have to work within commissioning services. That's an incredible difficulty. People are being extremely creative in how they do that. So what we're finding is that people in the NHS, my colleagues, I just want to kind of bring that in because I have so much admiration for what's happening. People are using video teaching to really get that message out to parents, especially in the NHS, and I'm very excited about what we're seeing. So there's a lot more teaching happening and teaching being made available for individuals and families to learn more about the neuroscience between some of the behaviors, and that's really, really exciting. For me personally, the challenge is that there's never enough time, and what we want, sometimes there's not enough time for this child. The children and families that we sometimes work with, and the adults that I sometimes that come to me, are in crisis point. So working with them takes a lot of time. It takes, but you need a team. You need that whole village around you, and sometimes that village isn't available. And it's then that to me is one of the biggest challenges, is how can I, within the scope of my own practice, with the time available that I have, how can I maximize the opportunity to work with the person, and how can I really help them with my limited knowledge and skills to thrive. That's really difficult, and that's very, very hard. And then, as I say, there's the usual things about, in terms of business, we know it's at the moment we are in that kind of January phase where it's end of year accounts, and accounting is definitely, I'm an OT, accounting is definitely not, so the business aspects of it, making sure that we are compliant, making sure that we are safe in what we do, putting those strategies in place. The bureaucracy of running a business is something that I find really, really challenging. And it's sometimes it's my dad has this, we grew up with that. My dad would always say, is this something that you really need? Is it beneficial, or is it a want that you want? Whenever we went to him and said, Dad, I need a new top, he would, those three questions have stayed with me. And I think in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of the things that a business needs to work and for a business to be sustainable, those are the three questions that I ask myself. With this piece of paperwork, this kind of another policy, is there something that's necessary? Will it be beneficial? Or is it just something that someone wants me to do? And I think that helps me to prioritize through the bureaucratic kind of maze that I sometimes have to kind of fight my way through, because it's not my favorite thing.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned limited time there, and of course we've all got the same number of hours in the day, but are there any particular time drains that you have? Is it the bureaucracy, or are there other things that kind of take you away from what you really enjoy doing and find passionate about your work?
I think the bureaucracy definitely is, I would say, is number one. As occupational therapists, like many practitioners, we do need to kind of keep very detailed notes. And those are, and I know this sounds contradictory, but those are a pleasure in terms of the admin and the bureaucracy. But when you are trying to kind of work with family and you are looking at avenues to refer them on, but the system is stopping you from doing that, and it's so time consuming that those are the things that I really, really detest, is when what we're trying to do is, you can see the path, we know the pathway, but there's all kind of hoops and jumps that you need to jump through, and they take too much time. And sometimes that is really not what this person needs right now, because especially when they come to you at a crisis point, that's very, very difficult. And then, as I say, the kind of some of the, from a business perspective, is making sure that we are compliant, and that can be from a time perspective, sometimes you have to jump through several hoops when you're working with government institutions, and they need all the paperwork in place, and you think, really, do I need to fill this format 3 times? Is that really necessary? But yes, it's got to be done sometimes.
Thank you. And then I guess finally, what's on the cards for you in the next year or so? Do you have any particular plans for your work, or anything that you're looking forward to doing from a business point of view?
From a business point of view, in terms of the team that I work with, is about thriving, is about looking at innovative ways that we can work, not just our practice, but reaching out to similar practices around us and see if we cannot be a bigger voice in our local area, and through that reaching more families. For me personally, the sensory app is something that I'm very, very passionate about, and it's about getting that message out to people that overwhelm is something that we can work through that by breaking the circuit, and by stopping, and by noticing with intent. And I'm really, really hoping, so that, to me, that is the next year, is for me, is to learn more, and to see if we can bring a message, and to have a tool available that anybody can access, to help understand their own sensory preferences, and in that way to nurture their sensory system, so that life can be more joyful, and they can have the tools and the skills to be more resilient through that process, and in a step-by-step guided way.
And on that note, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such an insightful conversation, so much good education. I think we now know exactly what OT is, or at least some of our listeners who perhaps didn't before, and your really important work with neurodiversity, informed care, sensory-based systems, choosing joy, your thoughts about stress and burnout. Really, really wonderful conversation topics. So thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Andrew, thank you so much for the opportunity. I've really, really enjoyed talking with you, and I'm very excited too about the podcast, and I think it's wonderful.